So the reason that Hell Week exists is directly tied to this impossible mission that planners knew that some unit was going to have to undertake ahead of the Allied landing in Normandy. As early as 1940, obstacles are starting to appear on French and Belgian beaches. That effort hits overdrive in 1944, early 1944. But in 1943, there's enough obstacles that planners realize that they've got to put a unit in charge of the underwater demolition of the obstacles on the beaches in Normandy. The problem is bombers aren't sophisticated enough to blow gaps in these sea lanes to destroy the obstacles. And naval gunfire isn't accurate enough to do it either. Not only that, but when the Germans start putting mines on top of these obstacles, they fear that bombs are just going to make the problem worse because they're going to hit these obstacles and they're going to spray mines everywhere, complicating the landing even further. So they know that these obstacles with mines attached to them are going to have to be destroyed by hand. So the German defenses are getting more sophisticated with every landing. Their defense in depth is improving. So they know that how do you handle this problem. So Navy has a sort of institutional power grab with the Army to try and take the mission. The Navy's leaning hard into taking as much responsibility away from the Army as possible, so they put this mission in the hands of a very young Draper Kaufman. Draper Kaufman is, if you know from the book, he was a Navy reject. He had gone through the academy because of poor eyesight. He's allowed to graduate, but he's kicked out of the Navy, so he's not allowed to serve. Fighting for his own relevance, he ends up joining the French Army as an ambulance driver. He's captured. He becomes a POW. He's released. Instead of returning home to the United States, he joins the British Navy, becomes a bomb disposal officer, fights through the Blitz. By the time of the U.S. entry into World War II, he's probably the American who's seen the most of the war so far. So he has a much more sophisticated understanding of what combat is than probably any other American alive. And when he's handed this mission of destroying the obstacles, he knows he's got to create a unit that's capable of doing it. So he goes down to Fort Pierce. He starts to research, the other commando organizations that are operating down there. He finds the Scouts and Raiders. He kind of enlists a cadre around himself. He likes the Scouts and Raiders curriculum. The Scouts and Raiders curriculum has been developed in part by former NFL jocks. It's very team oriented. Lots of log PT, lots of small boat races, things like that. The only problem with that is it's not compressed enough. It takes too long to create the type of unit. He doesn't have a lot of time before D-Day, so he has to. He's trying to figure out what to do, and he's talking to his cadre, and how hard should this training be? Should it be twice as hard? Should it be 3 times as hard? One of the other Navy chiefs who's there, who's experienced combat himself, says, knowing what the mission is, this should be 10 times as hard. So Draper Kaufman, he takes the Scouts and Raiders curriculum, compresses it from 8 weeks into 5.5 days, and that's how we get Hell Week. And then, almost immediately, planners are skeptical of this. They're like, the first couple classes that he puts through, the attrition rate is very, very high. Planners are like, how can you justify this? Nobody else is losing this number of volunteers. Because Draper believes that this mission is so important, and he has to create, units that are capable of adapting and thinking on the fly, and enduring such, harsh conditions in a maritime environment, he justifies the course by putting himself through it. Completes the course himself. Planners give him a stay of execution. The guys that complete Draper's course go on to land on D-Day. In many cases, they land ahead of their Army comrades, while the Army soldiers in those first waves are able to take shelter under the lip of the bluffs in the shingle direct fire of the enemy's guns. The NCDUs have to stay out in the in those in the beaten zone where machine gun fire, artillery fire has almost unimpeded access to them, and they suffer 52% casualties. So of the 190 NCDUs that land on Omaha Beach, 32 are killed, another 65 are wounded. So it's one of the highest casualty rates in all of D-Day. Because of that, planners are loath to get rid of the course, and they essentially let Hell Week stand because it proves that these guys could accomplish an impossible mission. So that's where we get it.
The fact that story is not told to every Bud student the eve of Hell Week starting, to me, is a fucking travesty.
I think it is now, but you're right. I mean, I didn't know the story myself. I think it's and it is it's an incredibly important story for us to understand. Like we were born with that impossible mission. That impossible mission is what brings this institution together.
Yeah.
And
man, that's incredible. Like I had no idea about any of that, which is kind of embarrassing. But
no, I mean, but it's it's the process of figuring out where you come from, and everybody. I might have been the first one to put it all down, but now that scores of people are reading this book and they're, it's incredibly meaningful. I think. There should be staff rides. We should take whole platoons over to Normandy, to walk those beaches, and see the monument, and then connect their own service to this day, this most important day. It's the most important day in the history of the 20th century. Yeah. It's the day that determines whether or not we're going to win the war.
Yeah, I guess hearing you say that and then realizing like, man, I had no idea any of that was the case. It reminds me of like the high school kid that has no idea how America came to be, and it's like, fuck, you should know that.
Yeah, but it's not a young person's fault for not being interested. It's I mean, we're all about the same, and it takes a long time before I think anybody has the maturity and the perspective to start looking over their shoulder.
Yeah.
And realize, I'm not the first person to live on this planet and to experience these things. I've just accepted the world for what it is, but not really recognized the sacrifices that it took to get here. And they're not wrong to to think that way. It's up to the folks that have that perspective
to beat it into them.
To find those moments of meaning and develop. It takes a lot. It's one of the great things about writing this book has been that I've been able to reconnect with the institution as a whole and go out and have present and talk and things like that. And it's amazing how many guys you talk to that are in senior positions in that training apparatus who don't know that history, but once they do know it, it becomes so much more meaningful to have that context, to have that texture. That's it's motivating and it's instructive. Now you know why we're getting guys wet and sandy.
Yeah.
Like the reason we're putting guys, making guys get sugar cookied up in the surf is because some UDT guys in the Pacific were doing the exact same thing to conceal themselves from Japanese sentries. So yeah, it's miserable, but there's a point.
Yeah. It's not just to be miserable.
Right.